On September 4th, 2025, screens across Nepal went dark. The government had just banned 26 of the world's biggest social media platforms. Officially, the reason was to curb misinformation. But for Nepal's Generation Z, the motive felt far more personal. They believed the state was trying to kill a hashtag Nepokids. For months, that tag had been a gallery of fury, showcasing images of politicians' children flaunting extreme wealth. Luxury watches, European cars, designer clothes. This stood in stark contrast to the reality for most young Nepalis, who faced a 20% unemployment rate and a future where leaving the country was often the only path to a career. The nation's economy depends on it. Remittances make up a third of the GDP. So when the government tried to silence them, Gen Z didn't retreat into the quiet. They poured into the streets of Kathmandu. On September 8th, thousands gathered, many still in their school and university uniforms, turning the city center into a sea of protest. They weren't just fighting for their apps, they were fighting for a future they felt was being stolen from them. The response was brutal. First, security forces unleashed tear gas and water cannons. Then came the rubber bullets. And finally, live ammunition was fired into the crowds.
The protest near the federal parliament building became a scene of chaos and violence. When it was over, the cost was staggering. At least 51 people were dead and more than 1,300 injured. But the state's overwhelming force didn't crush the movement, it hardened it. The following day, enraged protesters stormed the parliament building itself, setting parts of it ablaze. As smoke billowed over Kathmandu, Prime Minister KP Sharma Oli resigned and fled to an army barracks. The government had made a critical miscalculation. They tried to unplug a generation that was born online. While the main platforms were blocked, VPN signups in Nepal surged by 6,000%. Protesters coordinated on encrypted messaging apps and alternative platforms, turning the ban from a tool of suppression into a symbol of their own tech-savvy defiance. This explosion of anger wasn't born in a single day. The social media ban was merely the spark that lit a pyre of long-held grievances. The kindling had been piling up for over a decade. Since abolishing its monarchy in 2008, Nepal had endured 17 years of crippling political instability, cycling through 14 different governments. None completed a full term. This constant turmoil created a vacuum filled by corruption and nepotism, eroding any trust the youth had in their institutions.
Their protest demands quickly evolved far beyond lifting the internet ban. They called for the mass resignation of the entire parliament, the suspension of officials responsible for the killings, and the introduction of a mandatory retirement age for politicians to break the cycle of the old guard clinging to power. It was a clear message. They didn't want to just fix the system. They wanted to build a new one entirely. The pressure worked. The government collapsed. With a prime minister gone and parliament dissolved, President Ramchandra Paudel made a landmark decision. He appointed former Chief Justice Sushila Karki as the interim prime minister. Karki, renowned for her unyielding anti-corruption stance, became Nepal's first woman to hold the office, a direct answer to the protesters' cries for clean, trustworthy leadership. The social media ban was lifted, and new elections were scheduled for March of 2026. But the silence had already been broken. In the span of a few weeks, a generation often dismissed as politically apathetic had forced a complete political reset. They showed that their power wasn't just in the streets, but in their ability to organize, adapt, and refuse to be ignored. The protests of September weren't the end of a story, they were the start of one. A generation had found its voice, and now an entire nation is waiting to see what they will say next.